Good evening and welcome to the Fourth Estate. My name is Barbara Mong and I'm standing in for Charles, who is on leave. Tonight, we are going to discuss the media sensitivity in covering disaster. We've had a number of disasters in this country. The latest is the boat which capsized on Lake Victoria. Before that, we had the Bududa mudslide and a number of people who are affected by famine, affected by drought. We've had a number of disasters in this country. And when covering disaster, journalists do face different challenges. Journalists who make the best plan, get to the field and also fail. And also journalists do face a number of criticism, balancing public interest and balancing ethics. How do we do this? Tonight, to discuss this topic, I have three well-established, experienced media personalities. They're teachers, they're writers, they're broadcasters. Let me start with my guests immediately. Miss Betty Mirembe, the editor of Metro FM. You're most welcome.
Thank you, Barbara.
Next to Miss Betty is Dr. William Taebwa, Head of Mass Communication Department, Makerere University. Doctor, you're welcome.
Thanks very much, Barbara.
And next to Doctor is Sister Denise Samanya, Head of Mass Communication, Nkozi University. Sister, you're most welcome.
Thank you, Barbara.
Yes, I would like to start with you, Sister. I'm sure you watched on TV or even followed some of your students actually covering the boats that capsized on Lake Victoria. What do you make of the media coverage of that disaster?
Thank you, Barbara. But first of all, I'll first thank the media for letting us know what is taking place, because that is their responsibility. And we came to know about it. We came to know the cause. We came to know who was behind it. We came to know how it happened. And we felt concerned. People came to know that they have lost their dear ones. That one was news. But as the story went on, things were changing. You can find that there are some areas where we lost in some bit of ethics. That some of the pictures we brought up with the journalists were really affecting, especially the relatives of those who died. And it was giving a pinch to their hearts. As a journalist, following the ethics, you have to respect somebody's rights. Even if somebody is dead, they still have to protect those people. How are you putting them out there to the public? In which style? And who are you touching with the pictures you're putting up? Who are you touching with the story you're putting up there? Some of the pictures were really, it was very absurd. Me, I was pinched, though I wasn't a relative there. You could feel, this picture, I think I shouldn't have put it out there. That is the area where I was very much affected as a teacher of journalism.
So you are affected by the lack of ethics.
Lack of ethics.
But then also you appreciate the amount of information that the journalist actually gave to the public. Dr. Taebwa, what's your conclusion, or what do you think about how we covered this disaster?
What I think is, as Sister has pointed out, under those circumstances, it's always a tough balancing act. You as a journalist, you have a responsibility to inform, as Sister has said, to educate. But on the other hand, you also have the responsibility in such an instance where so many people are involved, and so many information is not obvious, or some of the information is very sensitive. You have again the responsibility of minimizing harm. So that balancing act becomes very tricky, and it depends really on the media houses. So some media houses will insist on the traditional roles of journalism, which is to inform and tell the truth in the most empirical and direct manner possible. While you are going to get some media houses and some journalists who are going to be very sensitive about the ethics of exposing victims, for instance, dead bodies, that we know that in some media houses you are not supposed to expose bodies of people. But we saw that happening in this particular instance. So it's a very tough balancing act, and really it depends on which media, the individual media houses, again going by their codes of ethics, because every media house has a different code of ethics. Some will insist on truth and telling the truth as it is, while others will be more concerned with minimizing harm and making sure that very sensitive information is not exposed. So it's a tough act, and these are tough cases even for us as journalism trainers. On the one hand, the need to inform and to educate the public, as Sister said, but on the other hand, balancing the ethics of making sure that you don't expose people who are grieving, and therefore, by so doing, exposing them more to trauma. So that's my take, and we shall of course discuss later on in the program what should be done and what shouldn't be done.
Miss Betty, you are the editor, and I'm sure that you sent your reporters out there when you heard about the disaster on Lake Victoria, and so many others before that. As the editor, who is always receiving this copy, you're receiving the raw copy from the field, you're actually editing the copy, and you're presenting the copy actually to the public. What do you think? Because Dr. Taiba and Sister Denise says that we've actually faltered. It's been actually 50-50, that they've given us 50 on informing the public, and actually 50% on ethics. It's not 100%. But as a practicing journalist, someone who is out there in the field, what do you make of our performance? How did we cover this disaster?
Thank you very much, Barbara. The disaster was covered, I'll say, well, for some reasons. Though there was a problem with the photos. Anyway, I'll say the photo ethics were not considered at all. They were not considered at all because personally, when I'm editing a story, I think of the end. I put myself at the listeners, the viewers' end. How will that person take this story? I usually like to put the story in a way that the listener, the viewer, the reader would make their own conclusion. But this time, there were photos that were put in the media. Some media houses put on their social media pages, and personally, I identified my people from that. I had friends, 2 ladies and 1 gentleman, but the 2 ladies, I identified them there and then, because my daughter, 6-year-old, I identified, and she said, there is Auntie Sheila. Because she knew the dress, we had talked to her. So I think what they should have done in the beginning, the editors who sent the people to the field, they should have done, you put that event into a table, you draw a column and lines. In the column, you put the what or the who. Then you put the lines, you look at the facts, you look at the technical side, what was there, the responsibility. Then in this other column, you look at all the victims, the rescue, the technical part, like the witnesses, the technical part, the police, How will they respond to that? Then when you come out with your story, whether it is live, if you have that table, personally, I think it will be covering majority of the stuff we need. You'll be able to get the ethics and part of the objectivity.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's interesting. For me as a practicing journalist, that's really, it's worrying, but then also encouraging. Disaster is actually on the rise in Uganda, and we've had very serious cases. For example, by the way, disaster in Uganda, it's not just the boat accident. It's not only the mudslide, the landslides. When you look at the national policy for disaster preparedness, even famine is classified as disaster. Drought is also terrorism when there's a terrorist attack, when there are accidents on the road, accidents on the water, like we've had. So when we're talking about the media coverage of disaster in this country and the sensitivity, we are talking about all that. How do we cover people affected by famine? How do we cover actually people affected by road accidents? So we are actually looking at that in general. And I think when you look at statistics from government, in 2008, drought affected about 750,000 Ugandans. The following year, there was landslide, which killed 250 people. About 8,500 people were actually displaced. In 2010, we had floods, especially Teso was affected most. We had 350,000 people actually affected. So when you look at the figure from government, when you look at the data from government, okay, you may think these are just figures, but the human faces behind this. There are people affected by this, and as journalists, our role is to bring this forward to the people. I would like to ask you, Dr. Tayeba, as a teacher of journalism, how do you prepare your students actually to cover disaster?
I think that's one of the the biggest challenges we've been having. And in our curriculum right now, together with several partners, UNESCO for that matter, but also our partners in Norway, University of Oslo, we've been holding workshops on safety and security of journalists. First of all, to make sure that a journalist covering such events is prepared. So that's point number one. Number two, also mainstreaming these issues of safety and security of journalists in curricula. I think most of our journalism curricula has been missing issues to do with security and safety of journalists, and this is something that we are addressing. But when you talk about conventional journalism training, I think we've been doing a pretty good job in empowering the journalists, number one, to become good reporters, empowering our students to become good reporters, of making sure that they report these events when they happen, because as you've said, these are events that affect people, and that's very important. So to look at the causes and the drivers of these causes. What are the drivers of the famine? And the drivers of the Bududa happening. A couple of years ago there was Bududa, now again it's happening again. What happened? Those people were not supposed to be there, they were supposed to be moved. But why were they still in that place? What about famine? We have a whole ministry of disaster preparedness. How come we still have all these disasters and nothing is happening? So that's the role of journalism, to engage with these issues and to question. And we train our journalists to do investigative journalism, but of course if the institutions for which they work do not empower them to do the job, then it becomes very hard for us as trainers. Same thing with ethics. We teach our students to respect the ethics, as my colleague here has been pointing out, with these photos, very insensitive photos that are being published. But once again, you train these people, they come out and they go to work for a media house that insists on having these photos however insensitive they are published. So this particular journalist has only one choice. Get out of that media house and basically lose your job if you want to insist on doing ethical journalism. So it's a very big challenge that we as training institutions cannot handle alone. We have to work with editors, we have to work with media houses, we have to work with civil society groups to make sure that everyone is on the same table to really bring these issues out and address them the way they are supposed to be addressed.
Sister Denise, would you like to speak from there as a media trainer?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Barbara. What I would like to add on from what the doctor said is that we really train these people. You may find that it's not only the trained journalists that are really covering these things.
Yeah,
Because the camera is in hands of everyone.
that's true.
Everyone takes the picture the way he wants. What is his interest? What would he like to put out there? Personal interest in the scene. Social media these days, there are quite a lot of things which are going out there which are not ethical, but are not done by the journalists who have been in class, trained, and have really practiced. So that is also another challenge. You are going to teach them, be like this, and they go there and they do it. But we have also others who are doing citizen journalism there.
So, Miss Betty, you've had all this as a person who is always assigning these journalists, sending them to go out. When you ask them to go out, do you prepare them? How do you prepare them actually?
Preparing them for disaster reporting.
Exactly.
What we should know first of all, these people are not machines. They are human beings. So you think about them too. They'll be taken over by emotion, and they'll forget about the objectivity.
Let's hold it there. Emotions. That's a very interesting thing. Are journalists allowed to have emotions when they are covering disaster? Are journalists allowed to identify with the people who have been affected by disaster? Let's discuss this and much more after the break. Welcome back from the break. Tonight, I'm sitting in for Charles Mangusha, who is on leave, Barbara Mong, and we're discussing a very interesting but also sensitive topic about media sensitivity in covering disaster in this country. We've had a lot of complaints from the public, how the media is so insensitive, how we are sharing pictures of bodies, how we are asking people who are grieving very difficult questions, we're not caring about them. But then also on the other hand, we do have the role to inform the public. To what extent should we go as journalists to actually inform the public? The recent disaster that we've had a lot of talk about the moral, the moral aspect of it, what happened on that boat. We've had a lot of talk about the weak laws. We've had a lot of blame game between the government and the people who should implement the law, and then also government on the other hand saying that the victims should have taken care of themselves. It was not purely the role of government to ensure that they were safe. So just to take you back a little, let me start with Betty. Did we actually ask the right questions about this disaster?
About the Victoria disaster.
Exactly.
There were a few questions that lacked. I would say that in my personal view. As an editor, the question that lacked most was the question from the professionals. We were talking of the faulty boat, a DMC boat, because I came to realize that this was a cargo boat that used to carry fish. So we never got any professional that was asked. When I say professional, they are boat builders. How come that boat came to take passengers? We go to the people with the boat building. How it was transformed, who transformed the boat. All those questions we are supposed to go to the professionals. If we had that table I told you about, you know who to ask. 2, the victims. With the victims, you look at the two sides. There are victims who are drunk. When you look at some video clips that are moving around, there are victims who say they were not drunk. They saw the boat. It was a DMC, but they continued with the boat. Then the police is saying they stopped the people, but they went ahead. So we also don't have enough questions. We never got so many questions from the police, especially the marine side. Secondly, all the witnesses, the survivors we are getting, they are giving us one side. And as journalists, we've not gone to the professionals to confirm. So that's why I'm saying that the question of asking professionals is missing.
Yes, one complaint that came through is that the drama was on TV, the drama was on radio, and the newspapers. You know, we were interviewing people, we captured the events, we captured the rescue process and all that. But beyond that, we did not ask the right questions. Dr. Tayebwa, did we ask the right questions? Did we fail the public? And how exactly did we fail the public?
I think in some respects, as my colleague has said, we could have asked more questions. I have seen some journalists, a few of them, attempting to ask some of the questions, for instance, to do with the fact that was this boat, which was, as she said, in dangerous mechanical condition, licensed. Was it allowed to carry passengers? And yeah, so those are the kind of questions. So basically the role of government in all of this ought to be interrogated further. The issue of safety really of us as citizens, boarding a boat like that and a couple of people, we don't want to blame the victims, obviously, but no life jackets. You know, these are some of the questions that I think that come down to me, it comes down to really government not doing the job of making sure that they ensure that you know, whether it's vehicles plying our roads or boats plying our lakes and rivers or borders plying our roads once again, that they are not in dangerous mechanical condition and therefore endangering the lives of the users. So I think those are questions. It's a question of responsibility, and to me, the biggest responsibility goes to the person who is supposed to be, you know, controlling the use of some of these vessels on our lakes, and that's where I want to see more of the questions asked.
According to government, police actually tried to stop the victims, and
to stop the boat from going.
Yes, to stop the boat.
Why didn't they stop it?
Well, that's according to government.
Police.
But according to the survivors, there was actually no police. There was actually no one.
There you go.
The few of them actually tried to protest. Now, as a journalist who is supposed to report this, how do you balance that? How do you dig out and find the truth, Sister Denise?
In that respect, as a journalist, I would go to the police to find out, was it really the right thing? But is the police going to come out also give the right information I want? And if the police doesn't give it to me, what do I do? Because the right information there, if the police were supposed to tell us the right thing, and they told us what we know. But what you get from the victims who were asked, in fact, some of the victims were put in the limelight and they will really give us what they really experienced. But I've not heard people going to interview deeply these police officers who are supposed to control and really put them to task to tell us what really happened. There we lost a bit and we missed that part. I don't know whether we can go back to it. And another thing is it is very sad that the owners of the boat died. Otherwise, they would be the right people to tell us how we because we were after money, maybe this happened. Because it was this, they would have told us. But that one we lost aside too. There's no information there. That's what I could say about this.
Well, disasters like the Bududa mudslide, this has happened not once, not twice, not 3 times, more than that. And what's been happening is that every time we are told that these people who have been displaced actually go back to the villages of origin, they are not comfortable staying in areas that have been actually, given to them either by relatives or actually land that's been given to them by government. Have we actually, as journalists, exhausted the Bududa story, Betty?
We've not, I'll say that. We've not. Because personally, I have a brother there. He's a teacher. So every time it comes up, I always call him, "Are you safe?" Then he tells me, it's just very far from where we are. So I ask a few questions, but I would say we need to follow up these people. Why do they go back? We've not asked the people from Bududa, why do they go back there? We've not asked the government, if a person is from Bududa, why do you buy land in Western Uganda, Midwestern Uganda, to be precise? For a person who has been in Bududa, Eastern Uganda, find land within the areas they know. But again, we should have asked those people, why do you always go back? And find out why do they go back. That is one thing. Secondly, these people need to be taught, and it is a job for us journalists, because we are out to inform them. We need to ask the professionals. We need to ask people who are well conversant with the weather situation, the landslides, because if you give people the weather forecast right now, they will say,
So why is your newsroom not asking these questions?
I would say that maybe we look at the disaster itself and we think of the public is more interested in this, and we forget about the real facts. I would say that as an editor, we usually look at what my listener would like, what my viewer would like, what my reader would like, other than getting what my reader would like. But how do I help those people? As something I studied, to help those people, to give them information. So that is where I would say maybe we're a bit reluctant about the best questions we should be asking.
So Sister Denise, how do we, as a trainer, how should we as journalists take it forward from here? Because we've heard from the public that we are actually violating their privacy. We've heard from the public that we are actually not asking the right questions. They need more and more information about disasters in this country, but they're not getting the right information. How should we take it forward from here?
Barbara, Betty's answer is giving us that there is a gap. And as trainers, we need to get these journalists we are training to go and dig deep into that, do the thorough research on what is really on the ground that is making this thing come again and again and again, and the people are there. When it dries up, when the season goes off, we go back and we settle. They have the treasure that takes them back there. Those are the things we need to go deep into, the thorough research, and really help even the government to touch those real areas so that we do not get it next year. That is how we can really help in that area. Because we have the tools to do that, we have the personnel to do that, and we only need them to get the information. Now for us, we are here to guide them. Go there, ask so and so. We have it. I think there we can get to a bit of the answer of the problem in Bududa.
There's the question of equipping journalists. As you're suggesting, that they need to get out, dig deeper, and all that. But there's the question of equipping journalists in the newsroom. Do they have the necessary equipment when they go out there to report? Have they actually been well trained and well briefed by the seniors in the newsroom when they go there? Do they actually even have things like insurance? Because when you're going to cover a mudslide, there's a possibility that you could be injured. When you go to cover the floods in Teso or any other part of this country, there's a possibility that something could happen to you. But so what's always happening in the newsroom is that they're always asking the questions. We are not being equipped to do this, and that's why we are failing the public. Yeah. So as an editor,
about the equipment, the problem we are having in Uganda is one. These days we have this, you have your equipment, you get the job. And in Uganda, we have very few media houses that will equip the reporter as the reporter requires everything. Because when you go to international media houses, at least they'll go 3 to 4 people in the field. There is a cameraman, there is a reporter, there is somebody to research. But we lose the objective from the newsroom itself, from my desk, in that I decide to choose the angle. Which story is better than the other? You understand? So I rarely look at the equipment. I'll decide the angle, I'll decide which story, and then I'll know which questions to ask. Then the reporter or the writer will just go to the field with my angle. Then reaching the field, she will know who to interview and not to interview. He will know which questions to ask. And he will also have the lead, unless it is decided on top. Other than that, we rarely look at the equipment itself. This one will be a testimony if you ask so many reporters, apart from those ones who are in the media houses that give them all the facilitation. So the rest, it is the reporter to go. I'll send the reporter with minimal funds. Go to Bududa, go to Chotera, go to Rakai, bring me the story. Those kids died in the fire. There was this Kichwamba fire. We had little knowledge and information about that. But because reporters transported themselves, the media house will look at where to stay. You're supposed to ask this. They will just give you transport without miscellaneous. So I'll say also the media house owners are failing the information part and public interest. On top of the objectivity, losing the objectivity from our desk. So once everything has been lost from the desk, it will take the turn of the editor. That is why I would say that.
In your training, Dr. Tarimbwa, is there an aspect of training journalist safety in covering disaster?
Well, I think I point, yes, Barbara.
Yeah.
I think I pointed out earlier that it's one thing to work on the aptitudes of the individual journalists, and I think as training institutions we've done our best. We equip these journalists with the skills to go out there and do a good job. But I think what you are hearing from my colleagues here, the editor here, it's very clear that the institutional factors also play in. You earlier on mentioned the issue of insurance. So sending these journalists to cover these events without life insurance is a problem. Health insurance and life insurance for that matter. If someone lost their life. Protective gear. We've seen riots where journalists are exposed to tear gas and beating, physical beating by by security operatives, and these journalists without protective gear. And this comes down to the institutions that employ these journalists. So we as training institutions, we can train these journalists and arm them with all these wonderful skills of being a good journalist. But if the institutions for which they are going to work do not provide that wonderful environment for them to be good journalists, you earlier on talked about Bududa and whether the journalists were doing a good job. The institutions, the employers of these journalists tend to focus to promote events journalism and not focusing more on investigative pieces that look at the drivers and the causes, digging deeper. And of course the employers are going to say, well, we don't have the resources to do that, and we, the trainers, are going to say, well, we've given you good products, so it's up to you now to provide them with the equipment they require, with the environment for them to do a good job. So yes, I believe that the employers can do a better job, and however much we as trainers can equip our journalists with the individual aptitudes to be very good journalists, if the environment in which they function does not allow them to do a good job, then it becomes like that biblical where you sowing the seed, and that seed is falling on hard ground, on a rock, and not being able to germinate. So sometimes I feel the frustration that you train these people and you give them very good skills, but at the end of the day, when they reach out there, they come and they report you. You read the story and say, but you could have done better. I don't see this question being asked, and so on and so on. I say, but doctor, there is no way I can ask those questions. I do not have the resources to go and interview the number of people that I want to interview. So those are quite of the big challenges that we have.
How do you go about, dealing with these challenges in your newsroom, actually, as the editor? The challenges of equipment, the challenges of funding, the challenges of insurance for journalists, because there is need out there for information. Yeah. There's need out there for us actually to do a proper job. Mm-hmm. People are asking questions. Mm-hmm. So what are those solutions? How do you overcome this in your newsroom?
First of all, overcoming this in the newsroom, I'll go to the parliament. And we, the people in the newsroom, I think we should find MPs that can help us bring a private member's bill, in that we can be able to front the insurance issue in a law.
The minimum
in a law,
as well.
Not in the minimum wage personally. I would look at the safety law. If we have it in Uganda, it is not working. If we have it in Uganda, it is not working. The safety law should be mandatory. Trust me, if you go to media houses and ask them, they don't have even a manual of how a reporter should be prepared in that issue. In case you get an accident on the job while in the field, some of these reporters were beaten recently, a few months ago. They were beaten up. They got injuries. Who is responsible for those injuries? Yes, we shall look for the person who first brought the injury to that person. But how are you going to press that person to pay? First treatment and insurance cover comes from the media house. As the media house presses for the other party to do the refund. But we don't have that. That means our law, the safety law, is not working. Even if I personally try to give my reporters all the safety and risk assessment issues, they will go to the field. They will try to follow that up. Fellow reporters will tell them, but you people are cowards. You people are cowards. You are hiding now. And if you ask reporters, they always have that. They will say, in the field, they say, that for us, we are not very serious with stories. So they will always fight for that. In that, for a reporter who wants to be secure, they always go to the social media. And they will get whatever is on the social media, they bring to you. There are video clips from citizen reporters. They will bring that. You as an editor who has not been in the field, you don't know what was there. It is the reporter who knows what was there. You look at the footage, you just sanction that we are taking off this. This clip will work. I'm taking this one. You see that? So, with this issue of the health, the hazards that they find in the field, we should find a law that will be able to help us.
Well, every disaster is actually different. And every day is a very different day in the newsroom. For someone who is covering riots, for someone who is covering protests, it's different. For someone who is covering floods, for someone who is covering famine, for someone who is covering drought, it's different and poses different challenges to journalists. Each disaster comes with a unique challenge. We'll discuss those challenges and how we actually deal with them, or how we should be dealing with them as journalists after the break. So let's go for a break, and then we'll continue with these discussions. Welcome back. We are discussing media sensitivity in covering disaster in this country. We are actually auditing ourselves, how we are performing, and areas where we are lacking, how we can actually do better. Because the role of the journalist basically is to inform. And our role is to give people news that they can use as a utility. News is a utility just like water, just like electricity is utility. Information that people can use every single day. So when we're covering disaster, like they tell us in the class, in our journalism classroom, you know, the before, which is when you're preparing to go and cover disaster, how should you prepare, what should you do, the kind of information that we should give people that's actually useful to people. For example, people who live around Mount Elgon area, people who live in Amuria, people who live in Karamoja. What should they know before the drought? You know, what should they know before the mudslide? Are we actually performing our role? Are we informing people? Are we actually seeking for that information and giving out? During this disaster, how we're reporting beyond the events, beyond telling people that this number of people died, beyond getting testimonies from the survivors? Are we giving people more information? Are we actually equipping them actually to demand for more information from government? And then also the question of ethics that the panelists mentioned here. But the question of ethics, the sensitivity when you are reporting, how should a journalist actually balance between public interest, because the public would like to know people who died, how they were affected. The people actually appreciate the bodies. Then there are people who just do not appreciate the bodies. There are people who are crying. And as journalists, you want to capture that emotion. How should we capture the emotions minus hurting their loved ones? How should we capture the emotions minus actually offending the public? Betty?
Personally, I would say we should weigh. If those people who want the photos and those people who don't want the photos, let's put them on a weighing scale and see who takes the better of it. And I know those who don't want the photos, the images, the graphic images, will take it. Secondly, the emotional part. There was one media house that did it a bit well, though they brought in something different. There was some infighting. with somebody who passed on with this boat accident. But if you can get to the person, well and good. Know what to ask. Don't ask the questions that will hurt them more. Like right now, the question that has been going on, especially with the women. Did your husband tell you that he's going to the boat? What do you think they were doing at the boat? Those are the clips I'm getting from the YouTube channels of some media houses. And I look at them and I just say, oh God, this shouldn't have been asked. And it is a live broadcast. You ask somebody, did your husband tell you that he's going? What was he doing on the boat with such girls? You see, you bring the blame, you put in anger in somebody that the anger they never had. You don't know how that person went on the boat. So let us think of the moral itself, we ourselves. We should know what to ask and when to ask it. Don't come to somebody and tell that person, good morning. What is good about the morning when I've lost my husband? What is good about the morning when I've lost 4 family members? We should know what to ask. Know how to greet. First, get acquainted with the area, the people around. Get to know their culture in case somebody is dead. How do you ask that person? How do you greet that person? How do you approach that person? Then after that, look at the graphic image you are going to put forward. If that person is really in a bad shape, why do you put that on? Let us go back to the human being in us. You have the story, you've got everything. I would say, we as editors, we should sit and have an organization and at least have an association whereby we should have a compromise on how to handle such issues. That would be my story.
This is interesting, but Dr. Tayewa, public interest versus private lives. We operate in a country where government actually believes so much in secrecy that they do not give information about the affected people. In countries like the US and other places, they do say that after informing the immediate family, then they can release information out to the media so the media can share with the rest of the public. In Uganda, people get to know when they see pictures, images on TV, when they get to see pictures on newspapers that, oh, actually lost a son in Somalia. We've had our soldiers in Somalia for more than 10 years now. And every time we go seek for information, they say that we need to first inform the immediate family before we actually release information to the media. So how should a journalist actually go about reporting such a disaster? Public interest versus private lives. When is it okay to actually disclose victim information to the public? When should we do that as journalists? At what point?
Barbara, that's a tough one, and it depends really. It's a tough one. It depends on, as you know, journalism or journalism institutions are part of society. We are not in isolation of the society in which we function. And just like politics, even within journalism ethics itself, we don't agree. There are schools within journalism ethics. So on the one hand, the school of journalism ethics that insists on, if it is real, report it as it is, as long as it is truthful and it is empirical. An accident happened and so many people died, report the event as it happened. Inform the people, educate the people. By someone seeing all that, death is part of life. So there is that school, so that insists on the real, on the empirical evidence, on what is truthful, on what is, as you say, that should be in the public realm, especially when it involves public officials. On the other hand, we have that school in journalism ethics that insists on empathy, the Judeo-Christian tradition that says do not do to the other what you don't want done to you. So insisting on empathy, insisting on humanity, insisting on minimizing harm. And that disagreement is very real in the media houses themselves. That some media houses are going to put that information out there without any regard for what the people who are empathetic, who are thinking about the humanity of the victims and the relatives and all these people affected, not traumatize them further. And then the other journalists who are going to say, well, for us, we report these events the way they are. So that's the struggle that exists there. On the one hand, to serve the public interest. On the other hand, the other school that insists on the private interest. And we see that playing out in the various media houses. And it's very hard, really, me who is a journalism trainer, who understands that, like politics, you have UPC, you have DP, you have NRM, all of them have different interests. I know that there are journalism schools of ethics, deontological ethics, you remember, utilitarian ethics, you know, who insists on the greatest number for the greatest good for the greatest number. The deontologists who insist on duty for the sake of duty. You don't tell them about empathy. And then the Judeo-Christian tradition, where very many people tend, you know, Uganda, we are a very Christian, very religious country. So we tend to be very, you know, more inclined to the Judeo-Christian tradition, which emphasizes empathy, which emphasizes the humanity of the victims, of the relatives and all these people, on the issue of minimizing harm. So it's very important, I think, for us to understand that it's in that environment in which the media houses function. And then you make it worse with citizen journalism. That if you do not want to publish those pictures, they are going to be out there. And there is competition in the media houses. So your competitor is going to publish them anyway. And for you who is insisting on ethics of protecting the victims and not doing any harm and being empathetic, you will miss out on the big story of informing and so on and so on. So that's the crisis we have. There is no one answer. Really, it depends on what kind of school of ethics one belongs to. The good news is that all of us work for, you know, different media houses that have very specific ethics. I know NTV would not probably put those kind of pictures, okay? The New Vision mainstream would probably not put them there. But then you go to Bukede, and Agatari Konfufu, and then you find all those pictures there. So how come this is one media house, same owner, one stream is almost not respecting, you know, the ethics as they want it, and then on the other hand, you have the other part of the arm of the New Vision that is very respective of these ethics. So it's no one answer. I'm sorry to say, Barbara. It's just that it's very important for the public to understand that within journalism ethics there is no one school. It's like political parties that have different points of view.
Well, there's the argument that when it bleeds, it leads.
There you go.
Okay? So social media has taken that seriously, that when it bleeds, we're going to lead with it, whether the family cares or not. And the mainstream media is now at a loss.
True.
At what point should we actually put the bleeding pictures? At what point should we not? I remember the former New Vision editor-in-chief, William Pike, at the peak of the war in northern Uganda, when Joseph Kony the Lord Resistance Army rebel commander, was actually cutting people's ears, cutting people's mouth, and boiling people in pots. At that point, he decided that for once, the front page of New Vision is going to have a horrific picture. And I don't know if you remember that, of a lady whose lips had been cut off. And he did this to shock the public, so the public could respond to the war and get to know what's happening in northern Uganda. So are there certain minimum standards that we should stick to, Sister Denise? Are there rules that we can actually break?
Yeah, there are moments when you need some issues, you need to put them to the public. But the public is warned first. That is the ethics. Let the public know the pictures that are going to come are like this and this, so that you don't shock them there and then. That is, they also will understand that you are breaking the ethics, but making them aware that you are going to do it. They are going to receive it and will respect your job. But this mere going to the social media simply because you have access to it, you have the camera in your hand, you know the techniques of doing it, and just put it there, hurting everybody, abusing the ethics, that's where we go wrong. But the other one, as Spike did it, that one was accepted because he informed the people, the vision is going to come out with this. People are aware. It is usually being done on NTV. The pictures that are going to come are so shocking. So a person is prepared emotionally. So that doesn't get so much affected. Even if he's affected, he was warned. You have the right to change to another channel so that you don't see those pictures.
And Barbara, before you go ahead, there is one thing I would like to tell you. I've seen one of the survivors. The gentleman has failed to talk up to today. When he was rescued, they thought he was dead. He was put among the dead bodies. The guy woke up and he was tapping on the dead bodies. Hey guys, where are we? Where are we? On realizing that he's among the dead people, he stood up. He stood there. Since then, he has not talked up to today. He has attended burials of his friends, but he's not talking up to today. So, I failed to put that story on. I couldn't. I looked at the guy, a gentleman. I would be minimizing him to say he's a guy. He's a gentleman, a family man. He is not talking. And it is the wife trying to be strong for the family. As an editor, I would think about that. Yes, there is this relative ethics, the situation justifies the means, there is the situational ethics, yes, all that is there. But if you've not seen that gentleman, you'll continue putting on the images. But for a person who has been in the dead bodies and waking up and asking them, hey guys, where are we? Stand up and we go. I don't think it will be ethical.
Miss Betty, as the editor, and actually in this era of breaking news and also bringing news to people as it happens, because that's what the public is demanding now. We want to know it as it's happening, you know, minute by minute news on TV, minute by minute news on radio, and also online. The public is demanding for more and more timely information as it's happening. So how do you then, in your newsroom, balance the question of privacy and at the same time reporting? Because when you have the TV cameras in Bududa, they are actually getting bodies out and it's being relayed live on the screen. The same thing which happened at the Mutima Beach. You know, it was live on TV. It was being broadcast on radio as it's happening, and the public actually always appreciates that. If there's a terrorism attack, people want to know what's happening there and then. So how should you then balance that? Not showing blood, not showing bodies on TV, on radio, not printing it, you know, at least newspapers, you know, it's the next day, you have time to think. How should we present timely news and respect privacy?
First of all, I'll commend the media houses that broadcast that event live, the accident. Some of them had the honor not to show the bodies. It was good at a distance, not identifying the bodies. If you have a drone camera, well and good. For the I would say for the TVs, they had a hard job than we people in radio and we people in the print media. But for the TVs, they had a very, very difficult job in that you have to display that they are retrieving a body, but make sure the body is not identifiable. What do you do with a drone camera? You zoom out. They will see, yes, they've got out that body. There was body counting because people were saying there were so many people. So when you are broadcasting the live event, if you can zoom out and zoom in where possible, because yes, we the media houses broke a few rules, but even our police broke some rules. You can't get a whiteboard and you begin writing all the dead people without informing their families.
Okay. Well, it's interesting to show or not to show the bodies, to reveal information or not to reveal information. How should we balance this as the media? That's what we're discussing tonight. Let's go for a short break. And after the short break, we'll have Dr. Taibwa and Sister Denise. Okay. Let's have. Let's continue with that. That discussion. Let's not drop the interesting topic. If you could pick from Miss Betty, how do we balance timely news and privacy?
I think I totally agree with her that on the one hand, there is need, especially for television, to use long shots, okay, span out. You are showing the people that yes, indeed, this is a body that is taken out, but without being, without traumatizing the victims, especially the relatives of these people who have died. That's really a very important consideration in journalism. That issue of minimizing harm, of that the humanity that ought to come into the picture. Yes, you are informing the people. You are telling them that so many people have died, and we can be able to see, especially for conventional journalism institutions. I still believe that the conventional journalism institutions should adhere to the principles of journalism and to the ethics, the conventional ethics. The citizen journalists will go out there and bring those pictures. Fine if the public finds these pictures on WhatsApp, but when it's not coming from the conventional media houses, then for me, I would still be happy that journalism is doing a very good job. So that's the balancing act that I think ought to be done. That the traditional media houses ought to stick to the journalism of empathy, of humanity, of minimizing harm. And then obviously we know that citizen journalism is here to stay. Let them bring those pictures and they will be out there, but without conventional journalism debasing the ethics and by being part of this fray of sensationalism and series journalism as we call it.
Yes, we have been accused of showing no care for the survivors, showing no emotions for the survivors, not thinking about the families. But we have also been accused of not delivering timely news. Do you train this actually? Is it something that you can train a journalist to do in class?
I believe so, Barbara. You can train a journalist to do timely news so that it doesn't go stale, or does not outgrow the stories, something like that. We do teach that. But don't forget, we are dealing with human beings who have personal interests, and it also depends on which personality are you teaching this. Is it going to tell it wholesale 100%? What is the experience on the ground given the story? And what is the media house demanding that? I think all these things have been asked, have been dealt with. And in order to protect the rights of the people you are covering, especially for TV or where you need to give pictures there and then, I think journalists should be very careful to take the rightful angle that does not expose these people and even causing pain to the relatives or friends.
Well, I would like to stay with you, Sister Denise.
Yes, please.
Miss Betty had mentioned in the beginning about emotions. As we come towards the end of this program, I would like to start with you as part of your closing remarks.
Yes.
Are journalists actually allowed to have emotions? Because every time we are going out, the editors tell us, leave your feelings in the newsroom. Get out there, tell me how many are dead. Tell me the extent of the injuries. Describe to me. Okay. So are we allowed to have emotions? How should we do it?
We are not allowed to put our emotions in our stories. But sometimes it overwhelms the people, the person. It can happen and you make a mistake. But how do you, it doesn't mean that you are supposed to praise your mistake and keep around with it. How do you get out of that mistake? Whenever you are able to handle your mistake or your emotions have spilled over, how do you handle yourself and how do you rectify that? Readiness to be aware that, I'm being emotional will help you calm down. But sometimes people may not be aware that they are being emotional. That one goes out. Yes, we are supposed to be able to control our emotions and be able to report positively. But because we are human beings, it can spill over.
How should we balance this, Dr. Tayebwa? How should we balance the emotions and not having emotions as you report in your closing remarks? Yes.
I think you can, in your story, you can actually show the emotions without you being emotional. And show the event so that the person out there can be able to feel what is happening out there without you being overtaken by the event. And the training of journalists is like the training of medical doctors. That's why we are called a profession. There is a reason why journalists are called a profession. Like medical doctors, like soldiers, you are supposed to deal with very difficult situations, but at the back of your mind, the medical doctor is thinking about healing this individual, not the blood that he or she is dealing with, not the possible death that might come out of this surgery, but all the thinking is about healing. And for us, our thinking as journalists is we are there to inform, to bring this information to the outer public. The public interest is our most overriding concern. The public interest, that I'm informing the public out there, I'm educating them, okay? I'm bringing this very important story to the people out there. And it's very important for me to bring it out there without being overtaken by the emotions. So that's the training we really give to our journalists, and it's very important.
So Miss Betty, in a minute, in your closing remarks, is it fair that we are asked to check our feelings all the time we get out there?
Yes, we should check our feelings. But when I said emotion, these people sometimes are not prepared. We don't prepare them.
Yeah.
There are things that take you over, but you don't show that. I'll tell you one thing. I'm one person who would like to know. If you tell me the graphic images coming are not good, So for those people who are weak, please step away from your screen. And I'm one person who will stay there. And when you blur the image, I'll begin talking small words. You've told us, you are showing us, now you're taking it off. But I have to think about those other people who are not into that. So if we prepare our reporters for such eventualities, I'm sure the reporters will give the story, they'll give all the details on top of putting aside their emotions, and they break down. Because my first story was covering this kid who was murdered in Chagwe, Shamim. I had a daughter, my firstborn was the same age, but I had to bring that story. That time I was with UTV. My editor, the late Sarah Mallet, I told her I can't cover this. She told me, I sent you for that story. I need those
do it for your
stories.
daughter.
I had to stand there. I put everything aside. I started reporting for other parents
Yes.
to know. I reported this story. But it took me like a week. I was lucky. I recovered from that. Since then, I was very protective of my daughter. So that is the emotion that comes back. That is why I'm saying they are not prepared. Right here at the scene, the reporter will be strong. But what happens after the scene? We have to look into that.
Yes, what happens after the scene, after the journalist has actually covered the story? That's one of the biggest challenge that we face as journalists. For the time I was covering war in northern Uganda, I could come back to the newsroom, and for a week I'm so traumatized that I can't even write a story. For the time I was covering war in Somalia, I went to Congo and all that. The same thing, the impact of disaster on journalists. It's something that we need to look into. It's something that we actually need to focus on, and the media houses need to do that. So thank you so much to my panelists. It's been a very interesting discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. William Tayebwa,
Thank you, Barbara.
Head of Journalism and Mass Communication School, Makerere University. Thank you so much, Sister Denise Samanya, Head of Journalism and Mass Communication, Kozi University. Thank you so much, Miss Betty Mirembe. She's the news editor, Metro FM. I've been your host, Barbara Mong. Till next Sunday, take care and keep safe. Thank you.